Good evening. This is Awani Tonight, and I'm Soraya Mia. Special session on constitutional amendment cancelled. And Pakistan elects opposition leader as prime minister after Imran Khan ousted in no confidence vote. That's coming up. The Dewan Negara's special sitting tomorrow on amendments to the federal constitution that will enable the anti-party hopping law has been cancelled. Instead, the constitutional amendment would be further studied and refined by a parliamentary special select committee. Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Datuk Seri Dr. Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar, told the special sitting of the Dewan Rakyat that the government and Pakatan Harapan had agreed on 3 matters regarding the amendments to Article 10 of the Federal Constitution. This includes refining the definition of barring members of the Dewan Rakyat from switching parties. The agreement was reached at a meeting chaired by Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob this morning. To unpack some of the reservations towards the anti-party hopping law, we speak to constitutional lawyer New Sin Yu.
The problem with anti-party hopping laws as proposed by the government is that it doesn't give any room for other types of scenarios where MPs have acted in the best interest of their constituency, what they felt was in line with the mandate that was given to them by their constituents, and it punishes them because they did not toe the party line. And that's very dangerous because a lot of MPs, a lot of Aduns, they become fearful. They become fearful of the fact that if they descend from the party line, they don't follow the party whip, they might end up losing their seat and they have to go for re-election again. And obviously that is a scenario where I think most MPs and Adun would, logically would want to try to avoid. So that's the problem with the anti-party hopping law that's proposed by the government, and it's also perhaps most problematic in the sense that it doesn't deal with perhaps the biggest hop of it all, when Bersatu as a party decides to hop from the ruling coalition to the opposition to form a new government. So that's, in those scenarios, the anti-party hopping law as proposed by the government, it is simply unsatisfactory, it is too wide, and it is very damaging to representative democracy.
Now, according to Sin Yu, the anti-party hopping law would in fact give full control to political parties and its top leadership over party members. He suggests for recall petitions instead, which returns the mandate back to the people to decide the fate of an elected representative.
Had the proposed amendment been passed, it actually gives tremendous powers to political parties. Political parties can actually control all of their MPs and Aduns, and it would allow them to ensure that all their MPs and Aduns toe party lines, and that's very problematic because, like what I mentioned earlier, you don't really have this essence of representative democracy anymore, because if everything goes party lines, then what about problems that are unique to a particular constituency? That might not be heard, for example. So political parties, they obviously want that so that they have more power, and political parties' elections would arguably be more important than the national election, because the true powers behind the MPs and Aduns are the political parties and their leaders.
He stressed that recall elections is the best way to ensure MPs and Aduns do not change parties for selfish reasons.
The best way is when there is, or when we say that there is, or claim that there is a betrayal of the mandate of the people, go back to the people, ask them if they feel that their MPs should be replaced. And that is why we need to introduce recall petitions. And what recall petitions does is that it allows those who have elected the MP or the Adun to have a say in whether or not they want their MPs or their Adun to be replaced. And how it would normally work is that there is a threshold number. It can be 10%, 20%, which would trigger a recall election. So once about that threshold number of people in that constituency says that I want my MP or I want my Adun to be replaced, then the MP and Adun will be replaced. He or she would have to stand election again, and then he or she would have to seek a fresh mandate. And if they don't, then you get a new MP and new Adun.
Commenting further on the topic is Tharma Pillai, co-founder of Undi 18, objecting the government's move to amend Article 10 of the Federal Constitution and supporting the recall election mechanism. Tharma emphasized the need to rebuild trust in the country's democratic system.
So there is a real dire need in terms of having political stability, having a government that we can rely on, and to have the idea that when I vote for this candidate, for this party, for this coalition, my vote has value. And I think that thing is so important, that narrative to sell to the public. So I think the impact is to youth movements out there and also more democratic related movements. I think the idea is that to get people to rebuild their confidence in the system and also into our democracy. And I think this ties in with the idea that we must have a high level of voter participation in order to legitimize democracy.
Tharma adds that the right institutional reforms are needed to address grievances among youths.
The answer to their problems must be a larger scale reform, larger scale institutional changes to make sure that we have more foreign direct investment, we have better economic fundamentals, but all those can only exist if we have the right institutional reforms, right? And I think we can't run away from talking about structures and in terms of politics that cause instability, right? That cause our politicians to not be able to focus on policy, that cause bad policies to go through. These are all part of that economic recovery, mechanism, and also that post-COVID recovery mechanism. So I do think that a lot of youth groups and activist groups are talking about this, that yes, economics matters, but looking at the state and the realities of our country, economic recovery can only come hand in hand with strong institutions.
We'll be right back after the break.
Rangkaian memang menakjubkan. Ia hubungkan kita, corakkan insan untuk kita gagah mara. Malah sedia menggendong aspirasi kita. Tak kira siapa, di mana kita berada atau cita-cita. Kita mungkin dari rangkaian berbeza. Bersama, kita kuasakan rangkaian Malaysia yang sentiasa sedia melakar masa depan.
Welcome back. Shanghai started easing its lockdown in some areas today, despite a record of more than 25,000 new COVID-19 infections. That comes as a relief for some of the city's 25 million residents, many of whom have struggled to find food and medicine as China battles its biggest outbreak in 2 years. The Chinese financial hub has classed residential areas into 3 risk categories. Those areas without reported infections over the past 14 days are labeled as prevention areas, where people are allowed in to move inside their neighborhoods with strict restrictions, but are banned from entering the 2 other areas. China maintains a zero COVID policy. The stringent lockdown in Shanghai was supposed to end on Tuesday, but has since been extended indefinitely. The harsh nature of the lockdown has prompted anger and protests from the city's residents amid reports of food shortages, children being separated from their parents, and deaths of unattended elderly patients at hospitals. Meanwhile, Indonesian President Joko Widodo says that the general elections will be held as scheduled on February 14, 2024, quashing rumors that his government is trying to extend his term in office. His statement came as thousands of students took to the streets to protest about rising cost of goods and the prospect of the president outstaying his 2-term limit. Rumors have persisted for months that Jokowi could seek to amend the constitution to run for a 3rd term, after some influential politicians publicly backed the proposal. But last week, Jokowi ordered his ministers to stop calling for an extension to his term or postponement of the 2024 elections. He asked them to instead focus on handling the rising threat of inflation. Presidents are limited to 2 terms under the Indonesian constitution, which was passed in 1999, a year after dictator Suharto was toppled by massive pro-democracy protests. Students marching towards the parliament building in Jakarta chanted about protecting the country's democratic progress. They're also protesting against soaring fuel and food prices. Now, opposition leader Shehbaz Sharif has been elected as the 23rd Prime Minister of Pakistan after 174 lawmakers voted in favor. This after a week-long of a constitutional crisis that led to Imran Khan being thrown out of office after losing a no-confidence vote. Ahead of the announcement, tens of thousands of Khan's supporters had marched in cities across Pakistan, waving large party flags and vowing support. 174 lawmakers in the 342-seat parliament had voted to depose him, 2 more than the required simple majority. Khan's PTI party had nominated former Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi as its candidate for the PM post, but PTI walked out before the vote, including Qureshi, announcing that they would be resigning en masse from the National Assembly. He claimed that the toppling of their government was a part of a foreign conspiracy. No elected prime minister has ever completed a full term since the country's independence in 1947, though Khan is the first to be removed by a no-confidence vote. In other news, French President Emmanuel Macron and his far-right rival Marine Le Pen kicked off campaigning for the French presidency. The second round of the election will take place on April 24th, and the polls suggest the race will be close. Following the first round of voting on Sunday, Macron came in first with 27.6% of the vote. Le Pen was second with 23.4%. This is their second face-off in the French presidential election. In 2017, Macron easily defeated Le Pen, winning 66% of the vote. While the 44-year-old Macron continues to dominate French politics, the poll suggests that his rival has a real chance of unseating him this time. The election campaign has been overshadowed by the war in Ukraine, with surging prices of everyday goods making the cost of living a key issue. Macron has strongly backed European Union sanctions on Russia, while Le Pen has worried about their impact on French living standards. The vote's outcome will have a major implication for the European Union, which Le Pen says she wants to radically reform. She has also said she wants to pull out of NATO's Joint Military Command. Macron is a firm supporter of NATO. Meanwhile, Twitter's CEO Parag Agrawal said billionaire Elon Musk has decided not to join its board. Musk was supposed to be elected to join the board after buying a major stake in Twitter and becoming its largest stakeholder. The abrupt reversal generates speculation about Musk's intentions for Twitter since disclosing he had taken a stake of over 9%. Agrawal has put out a statement saying that while Musk was supposed to be elected to the board on April 9th, the Tesla CEO communicated that the same day he decided to reject the offer. Neither Agrawal nor Musk have revealed the reason for this decision. This comes as a surprise, as Musk has recently been actively polling his followers on changes he wants to recommend. This includes his thoughts on new features for Twitter Blue, his desire to have an edit button, and a suggestion to convert the Twitter HQ in San Francisco into a homeless shelter. Over 850,000 senior citizens have yet to take their COVID-19 boosters, despite remaining a high-risk group for developing severe COVID. Tonight, we ask our guests what's behind the slow uptake among senior citizens. Coming up on Consider This. That's all we have for you on Awani tonight. Thank you for watching. My name is Soraya Mia, and we'll see you tomorrow.